Chapter 9, Battle on Iceland Part 1. The moonlight casted 3 shadows on the rooftop where Izuku and Himiko stood. With the arrival of an unexpected guest, they were certainly confused. The wind blew the girl's hair back from her face, revealing 2 horns on her forehead. The silence was broken by Izuku when he stood and said, "Wait, I'm a little confused here. Why did you call me sensei? And how do you know us?" Toga stepped back and got in a defensive stance, unsure of the girl's intentions. "Why did you call me auntie? Did you hit your head or something? I've never seen you before a day in my life." The girl then smiled and said, "I know this must be confusing, but I know you both quite well. You're Himiko Toga and your quirk is called transform. Once you digest someone's blood, you can transform into them. Where I come from, you taught me a lot and always took care of me. Sensei Deku told me I could trust you, that's why I brought you this." The girl pulled out a box from her bag that looked like it came from a bakery. She walked over and put it in Toga's hand. The blonde girl took the box and just stared at it before the girl spoke again. "It's red velvet, your favorite if memory serves." Izuku then said, "How did you know my name? And where exactly did you come from?" Still baffled by the stranger's sudden appearance, Izuku looked curiously at her when she said, "Apologies, you're Izuku Midoriya and my sensei, the hero known as Deku, whether you believe it or not." While the girl was saying all of this, Toga had opened the box, that contained a cupcake with red icing on it. It smelled enticing, so she bit into the pastry, throwing worry to the wayside. Her eyes instantly lit up once the delicious baked good hit her tongue. She looked over to the girl then said, "Is this?" The girl replied, "Yeah, it's typo your favorite. I make these for you whenever you come to visit." Toga's sensations were overwhelmed as she ate a baked good containing her favorite blood type in the frosting, something she would have never thought of before. Watching this sight, Izuku was still suspicious and went on to say, "Just because you know my name still isn't convincing me of what your intentions are. You could have just seen me in the sports festival and that's how you learned my name." He thought to himself that even if that was the case, how did she know his hero name? The girl then looked at him before sticking her hand out and saying, "Young man, you too can be a hero." Izuku's eyes grew wide at those words, and the memory of All Might saying that to him came rushing back. The girl then said, "You told me the story of how you met the man that told you those words." She walked over to him and pointed at his collar before she continued, "I also know that someone special in your life gave you this after you saved their life." Izuku was now convinced that this girl must know him somehow, leaving him speechless. The girl looked over to Toga and said, "Auntie, can I talk to Sensei alone for a little while? We have something important to discuss and I don't want to be rude." Toga, not sure what to think of all this, peered over at her green-haired friend and said, "Are you gonna be okay up here by yourself?" Izuku looked over to the girl and thought about how she didn't reveal that it was All Might that told him those words. She also knew that Momo made him that badge somehow. She obviously didn't want to discuss it in front of Toga, so he told his friend, "Yes, I'll be fine, and I'll call you later to let you know that I'm safe." She looked at the girl then said, "I don't know who you are, but if anything happens to Midoriya, I'll..." The girl cut her off when she said, "Let me guess, you'll stab me? I already know that you're prepared to pull your switchblade from out of your boot at a moment's notice. It's not necessary though, you can trust me." Toga stuttered at this, knowing that she did have a knife in her boot. She stuck her hand up to point at the girl, suggesting that she was about to respond before the girl said, "I'll tell you how I know one day, but I really need to talk to Sensei now." The blonde girl was spinning at everything that was going on. She turned on her heel and said to Izuku, "I'll talk to you later," before she jumped into the alley next to the building they were on. Izuku then offered the girl a seat. They sat, then he started his inquisition. "So, what's your name and how do you know so much about me?" The girl then took on a more serious face before she said, "I was born Eri Nomura, but as a child I was adopted by someone. My legal name is now Eri Aizawa." Hearing this, Izuku was shocked and wanted to interject, but he let her finish. You're going to find this very hard to believe, but I'm from the future. 11 years into the future to be precise. You see, my quirk is very unique, and with the right training I was able to travel back in time. She grabbed an apple core that was sitting in the empty bento box next to Izuku. She placed it into the palm of her hand, and it started to change. Izuku's jaw dropped at the sight of witnessing a once-eaten apple return to its uneaten state. When she was done, she took a bite out of the piece of fruit, then said, "My quirk is called Rewind, and it allows me to rewind the state of a living organism." Izuku smiled from ear to ear, excited about this girl's quirk. He blurted out with wide eyes filled with excitement, "That was amazing. How does it work? Can you fast forward things as well? How about Sensei, you're doing it again?" Izuku was jolted out of his muttering by Eri's words and said, "I'm sorry, but you really must know me if you were able to recognize one of my muttering storms." She let out a slight laugh and said, "It's okay, I've gotten used to them over time." Her facial expression changed back to a more serious one before she went on with her story. "In my time, things are very harsh and filled with heartache. The people are divided, and hero society is dwindling. This is why I've come back to try and prevent the future I'm living in from happening." Hearing this, Izuku couldn't believe everything she had just told him. Someone being able to travel in time just sounded impossible, but we live in a society where people manifest strange powers every day. This was a lot of information he was trying to process, and he needed some context. Izuku then asked Eri, "So, how do I become your sensei? What happens to me in the future?" Eri gazed at the green-haired boy for a little bit, then said, "You helped train me to be a hero just like you. I used to be frightened of the world, but you came along with your friends and showed me how to be strong. You taught me how to protect others." His heart got warm by her words, knowing that his passion for wanting to inspire people helped this girl. Eri started speaking again. "Sensei, in the future something happened that changed you forever. In order to stop it, I believe you have to prevent it from ever happening. Pretty soon you'll meet someone named Melissa. She has the answers to what you've been looking for. Trust in her, she will help save him, but she'll need this first." Izuku panicked and grew worried by that statement. "Wait, what do you mean? What happens to me?" Eri cut him off by saying, "Please, just listen." She pulled something out of her bag and handed it to Izuku. When he took it from her hand, he saw that it was a thumb drive and some sort of vial inside of a case. She started talking again as Izuku analyzed the objects. "All Might is going to fight his greatest enemy in Kamino Ward. He wins the fight but never makes it off of the battlefield due to his injuries. This event affected you immensely, causing you to doubt yourself and become reckless. Not too long after that you'll meet me, but when you do you have to let me go. You're going to start a fight that causes a death that you'll never get past. Trust me, we'll meet again, and that will be one of the happiest days of my life. The day you saved me, you told me that you'd do anything to protect me, and you kept your word." Izuku stood up and clenched his fist after listening to everything that's supposed to happen. The story filled him with anxiety. Eri took his hand and said to the boy, "You instill compassion on everyone in your life, and you believe in their dreams like your mother does for you. Stay true to your commitment and never forget who you are." The one-for-all inheritor relaxed and sat back down. Eri went on to say, "There's one more thing I have to tell you. It's about Auntie May. She is truly one of the smartest people to have ever lived, but she invents something that's going to change the world. She's working on it as we speak, and after she unveils it they're going to go after her. I don't know their name, but her machine is going to cause them to fear Hero Society. Protect her at all costs or she'll be taken and be forced to create something that will devastate the planet. Please help me stop a future where it's constant war and a fight for survival. It's up to you to become what All Might passed down to you, the symbol of peace." The world started spinning and the details of Eri's story started filling the walls of Izuku's mind. He didn't know what to do. Being bombarded with the knowledge of future events was too much and causing him to fear failing the mission he was given. Eri stood to her feet, then walked over to the edge of the roof. Izuku reached out and said, "Wait. I need to know more. How am I supposed to do this? Eri said before she jumped. Just remember what I told you and don't be afraid to ask for help. Eri disappeared into the mist as she leapt down to the street. Izuku ran over to the edge where she once stood, but the girl was gone just like that. He looked at the thumb drive-in case in his hand, then started wondering what should he do. Thinking to himself, who is Melissa? How do I protect everyone and prevent that future from coming true? 2 days later, Momo returns home after training with Jiro. She saw that she had a package waiting for her in the living room. She walked over to it and saw a note attached to the box. When she flipped it open, it read, "What do you get someone who saved your life?" I really didn't know how to answer that question, but I remembered you said how much you like putting things together. Here's a little token of my appreciation. I hope you like it. Signed, Izuku Midoriya. She put the note down, then started to take the wrapping off of the box. Once she got it completely unwrapped, she saw that it was a set of miniature drones. Her eyes lit up and she hugged the box tightly, filled with joy and excitement. She thought to herself, I can't believe he remembered that. I only mentioned it to him once and he remembered. Her face got a slight blush, then she hurried off to her room to put it together. She loved assembling things and learning how they work. It came in handy when she created items with her quirk. The next day, Momo and Izuku were in his room studying when she let out a sigh of frustration. Izuku looked over at her and said, "What's wrong?" Momo grabbed her hair and started yanking it before she said, "These quadratic functions are draining me of all my mental energy." Her eyes started to swirl in a cartoon-like manner. Seeing this, Izuku closed their books, then said, "How about we take a study break?" She fell back on the pillow behind her in relief, and Izuku went to grab some drinks from his refrigerator. He walked over to Momo, then handed her a soda and took a seat next to her. An idea then popped into his head, a little game they could play to get their minds off the math problems. He looked to her and said, "I've got an idea, let's play Truth or Dare. It'll be a fun distraction from all this studying." Momo, thinking that wouldn't be a bad idea, replied, "Sure, I'll go first. So, Truth or Dare?" Izuku scooted over so that he'll be facing his friend, then said, "Truth." Momo, having a question already in mind, asked, "What's something embarrassing you'd never want anyone to find out?" He looked at her curiously, then sat in thought before saying, "Since I knew you were coming over, I hid all of my All Might merchandise. Here's a picture of what my room normally looks like." Izuku pulled out his phone and scrolled to a picture of his room from just a week ago. She saw All Might's face in nearly every inch of the boy's room. His face or name were on action figures, posters, rugs, sheets and pillow covers. There was even an All Might themed light on the nightstand. Momo then looked around the room now and only saw one All Might poster with a few mini action figures on his desk. The room was completely different looking, nothing like the picture she saw. She turned to him and said, "Wow. Yes, I can see why you'd find that embarrassing." She let out a small laugh, then handed him back his phone. Izuku took it, then said, "Okay, my turn. Momo, Truth or Dare?" Not sure of this being a good idea, she replied to the boy. "Truth." Izuku smirked, then said, "Do you have a crush on somebody?" Momo did a spit take at the question. Not seeing it come from him, she wiped up her spilled drink and said, "What? Why would you ask me that?" Izuku just smirked, then answered her with, "Those aren't the rules. Either answer the question or you'll have to do a dare." Figuring that the dare he had in mind would be even worse, she let out a grunt and finally gave him an answer. Yes, I have a crush on someone. There, are you happy?" She picked up her pillow and threw it at the green-haired boy. He just laughed at her, trying to cover her face from embarrassment. Izuku, not wanting her to feel sad, said, "See, that wasn't so bad. Doesn't it feel good to get that off your chest?" The grin on his face angered Momo, making her think of the perfect way to pay him back. She looked at him with a sadistic facial expression, then said, "Fine, Truth or Dare?" Izuku, prepared for whatever may come, bravely said, "Dare." Momo, hoping for that exact response, asked him, Since you like embarrassing people, let's see how you like it. I dare you to go to the store in your underwear." She let out a small snort, then looked to see if her friend was going to beg her to change her mind, but what she saw shocked her to her core. Izuku had pulled his shirt off and said, "Okay, what do you want me to bring you back?" Momo's face grew red from seeing her friend topless in this setting. His muscles captivated her eyes and caused her to lose focus. That's when she saw him remove his pants, causing her to back up. She then exclaimed, "What are you doing?" Izuku, puzzled by her response, replied back with, "Going to the store. What's wrong? Does this make you uncomfortable? It's just underwear." Momo uncovered her eyes to see the boy now standing in boxers right in front of her. She was like a deer in headlights and didn't know where to go. He walked over to her with a worried look on his face. This caused her to back up into his closet, leaving her feeling trapped. She was frozen in place as he approached. He leaned over and got close to her ear, making her shudder from his breath. He whispered to her, "Everyone has underwear, even you." That's when she felt the zipper of her skirt being pulled down, causing it to hit the floor. He kissed her on her neck, giving Momo a sensation she had never felt before. He placed her hands above her head and her face turned completely red from this action. He then looked into her eyes and said, "Momo, I think I know who your crush is and what you would like for him to do to you." Momo's eyes widened at those words, and she covered her mouth. He started unbuttoning her shirt one by one until he removed it, now exposing her bra. She had on a dark green lingerie set that almost matched the boy's hair. He smiled at the sight, then whispered in her ear again, "Let's just make us even now." He unhooked the front clasp of her bra, causing it to hit the floor, and suddenly the sound of her alarm woke her up. Momo woke up in her bed, panting and breathing heavily. She was soaked in sweat. She found herself moist in some new places and didn't know what was going on. She then thought to herself, "What the hell was that?" A couple hours later, she saw a text from Izuku saying, "Hey, I hope you liked the gift. It was the least I could do." She nearly dropped her phone after seeing the message was from him. She didn't reply because she was so confused about her dream. She needed time to think, and since she was going to be representing her family at Iceland this weekend, it'll give her an excuse to avoid the green head for a few days. On a private plane over the Atlantic Ocean, Izuku finds himself staring out of the window of his plane, as it prepares to land on the greatest research facility in the world. He still had trouble sleeping after meeting Eri and hearing everything she had told him. This thought made him look over to All Might, who was putting his hero costume on. Remembering what she told him, the girl's words echoed throughout his head. All Might never leaves the battlefield. This caused the green-haired boy to grow even more anxious, noticing the distraught look on his pupil's face. Toshinori looked over to Izuku, then asked, "Is everything okay, young Midoriya? Is it the turbulence that has you looking so worried?" Hearing that, he shook himself out of his thoughts to reply, "Oh yeah, I haven't been on many planes, so I'm just getting used to it, I guess." The pro smiled and said to the boy, "Don't worry, we'll be landing soon, so get ready." After the plane landed, All Might transformed into his hero form and greeted the dozens of people waiting for him on the tarmac. They all but ignored the green-haired boy as he was carrying the bags, while All Might took pictures, signed autographs, and answered some questions. Once the crowd dispersed, they made their way into town. Izuku started muttering constantly as he looked on at the famous pros all around him. They found a city guide looking for direction to their hotel. They heard someone yell out, "Uncle Might." The pair turned around to see a blonde girl on a red pogo stick bouncing in their direction. She got about 5 feet away and said, "There you are." The girl then excitedly jumped up into All Might's arms and gave him a hug. Izuku was confused at the sight in front of him, thinking to himself, "This can't be the person we're here to see, could it? She's way too young to be a close friend of his. He must have met her when she was just a child if that's the case." That's when All Might said to his student, "Young Midoriya, let me introduce you to the daughter of my longtime friend, Melissa. This is one of my students, Izuku Midoriya." As Izuku shook her hand, and he thought to himself, "Melissa. Is this who Eri was talking about? Melissa then said. It's nice to meet you, Izuku, Uncle Might. Papa is going to be so excited when he sees you. I didn't tell him you were coming, so it could be a surprise. Follow me and I'll take you to him right now. 10 minutes away in the research lab of esteemed scientist David Shield, he stood there with his partner Sam discussing the arrangements for tonight's event. Sam, is everything in order with our friend? A blonde portly man with a round face looked over to him then said. Yes, by tonight we'll have it back in our possession. That's when they heard a voice say. I see you two are hard at work. I would expect nothing less from you, Dad. Sam, I hope that you're looking out for him since he doesn't always remember to rest. Sam responded to Melissa with. Of course, we look out for each other. Melissa smiled and said. Papa, I have a surprise for you. I know that you've been working really hard lately, and I figured you deserved something special, so I brought you somebody you'd really like to see. Dave, hello my old friend, how are you doing? David, totally shocked at the sight of his old friend, Japan's #1 hero, he gasped. All Might. All Might, filled with exhilaration, rushed over and picked up his friend, embracing him in a bear hug. He responded so that only All Might could hear him. Toshi, you're crushing me again. Hearing this, All Might quickly put his longtime friend down, then struck a heroic pose. David was speechless at who was standing in front of him. It had been over 10 years since he last saw him in person. David finally spoke. It's so good to see you, my friend. He looked over to his daughter and then said. I got the best kid in the world, surprising me like this. The two friends then said together. Kids, what are you going to do about them? They both started laughing out loud at what clearly was an inside joke only those two knew about. That's when All Might said. Dave, let me introduce you to someone. He stepped aside and there stood a starry-eyed green-haired teen in a hero costume with a big smile on his face. All Might then said. This is Izuku Midoriya, one of my students from the hero program. Young Midoriya, I'd like you to meet. All Might was cut off as Izuku shouted. You're David Shield, your quirk is called Squirmy Finger, it allows you to bend your fingers further than anyone else. You were All Might's partner in America and All Might slapped a hand over his pupil's mouth as he continued to speak. He then said. Don't mind him, he does that when he's excited about something. You just have to get his attention in order for him to stop. Hey kid, you're doing it again. All Might's shout got the greenhead's attention and shook him out of his muttering storm. He then scratched the back of his head sheepishly then said. Sorry, I got to work on that. Everyone started laughing. Then Melissa said to Izuku. How about I show you around the island while Papa and Uncle Might catch up? Izuku nodded then left the room with Melissa. That's when All Might coughed then wiped a little blood from his mouth. This caught David's attention, which made him say to his partner. Hey Sam, mind giving me and my old friend here a little time to catch up on some things? Sam agreed and left the room after he said. I'll go get everything prepared for tonight. Once Sam was gone, All Might returned to his normal form. Smoke filled the room and he started coughing profusely. David caught his friend then said. How bad is it now, Toshi? All Might with a grim facial expression said. It's gotten much worse since we last spoke. David helped Toshinori over to a large machine that looked like a chamber tube then told him to lay down and while he ran some test. On the streets of Iceland. Momo is walking with her friends Kyoka and Achako. She needed some company since her parents couldn't attend the event this year. The teens had nothing better to do so they agreed to come. As they walked past some street performers, Eureka said. Wow, that guy can stick his whole leg in his mouth. Disgusted by the thought, Jiro said. Did he at least wash his foot before he did that? Expecting a response from her friend, she looked to Yayoi Orozu, who was deep in thought. Jiro then waved her hand in her friend's face before saying. Yayo Mamo, what's got you so stressed out? It isn't muscles, is it? Being shaken out of her thoughts, she gained a slight blush before she responded with. No, what made you say that? We're just friends, and besides he's the last person I'd be thinking about right now. Jiro then said. Well, I'm glad you two are just friends, otherwise that might be upsetting to you. Not sure why her friend would say that. She looked over to see what Jiro was pointing at. Standing about 15 feet away, Momo saw Izuku with an attractive blonde girl looking at an exhibit of hero support items. The girl had the green-haired boy's arm linked to her own as they walked. After seeing this, a red tick mark formed on Momo's head. Izuku then heard, "You look like you're having fun, Deku." Hearing Momo's voice out of nowhere caused him to whip his head around to see where she was. He saw Momo just standing there with a Chaco beside her staring at him and Jiro with a sardonic grin on her face. Not wanting to be rude, he spoke. "Hey everyone, what are you all doing here?" Urarika then replied. Yayoi Orozu invited Jiro and me as her +1s for the event. What about you? Izuku then said. The first and second place winners of the sports festival were invited to attend as well. Momo then interjected into the conversation by saying, "Izuku, aren't you going to introduce us to your friend?" She asked while locking eyes with the blonde girl as if she was a target. Izuku then said, "Sorry about that. I'd like you all to meet Melissa Shield. She's showing me around the island as my unofficial guide." Melissa then shook Momo's hand and noticed it took a while before she let it go. Momo stared intently at her during the whole exchange. Melissa then said, "Nice to meet you. So are you all students of Uncle Mai?" Suddenly Melissa's arm was pulled and Izuku yanked her to the side before he whispered, "Please don't mention that you know All Might. Everyone isn't aware that I'm his guest on the island. He doesn't want them thinking he's showing favoritism among his students." Melissa, understanding his sense of urgency, agreed then said, "So, you all are in the hero program, I'm guessing. You mind telling me what UA is like?" As they walked, Izuku noticed Momo giving him an odd look and started pondering on what it could mean. The group went to get something to eat, and while Momo was sitting by herself, Izuku sat down beside her. She jumped at him being so close, then said, "Ah, where did you come from?" He looked at her curiously and said, "Hey, is everything alright? I tried texting you, but you didn't respond. Did I do something to upset you?" Feeling bad that she gave him that impression, the raven-haired girl calmed down and let out a deep sigh before saying, "Sorry about that. Things just got busy, and I was going to text you back when I had a moment." Izuku, relieved by that, smiled and said, "Great. For a second there I thought you were mad at me." Momo then looked over to Melissa, who was standing in line, and asked, "She seems nice. How did you two meet?" Remembering her use those exact same words when he introduced her to Kendo, Izuku decided to ask a question of his own. "We ran into each other while I was looking around. We started talking and hit it off." "Why, you aren't jealous, are you?" That's when the table cracked from Momo's grip on it. Izuku's danger sense went off, then he looked at his friend. A menacing red aura was covering her body, and her killing intent was even denser than Stain's. He wanted to run, but fear kept him in place. She looked directly into his green eyes, then said, "Jealous. Jealous. Who do you think you are, calling me jealous?" Before he could respond, she kicked him over the table, and he landed next to a nearby guardrail. Seeing him land, Melissa ran over to check on the boy. Thinking to himself to never use that word around his friend again, he sat up to see her walking off in a huff of anger. Melissa then made it to his side before saying, "Are you okay, Deku? What happened?" He simply said, "I said the wrong thing, that's all, nothing to worry about." The two stood to their feet and heard someone say aloud, "Way to go, Midoriya, you were somehow able to get one of the most beautiful women on this island." Izuku, recognizing the voice of his classmate, was actually surprised when he saw Kaminari standing there in a waiter's uniform next to Mineta dressed in the same. Not wanting to let his pervy side out in public, the grape head just gave a thumbs up to the green-haired boy. Izuku said in response, "Hey, you guys are here too." Ida popped up from behind them and said, "These two mentioned to me that they were looking for work, and since I was coming here to represent my family, I recommended them to the head of the kitchen." While listening to Ida, an explosion going off got the attention of the teens, which brought their eyes over to what looked like a villain attack simulation. As they went over to check it out, they came upon two more of their classmates doing the course. Melissa, seeing this, asked, "Do they go to UA as well, Deku?" He nodded, then pointed at the boys. "They're actually in my class." That's when they heard the announcer call out, 18 seconds. The smoke cleared on the field and Bakugo stood there feeling good about being the current record holder. He looked up and saw his green-haired rival staring back at him. He rocketed up to the balcony, then said, "What the hell are you doing here, you damn nerd?" Ignoring that, he looked to Melissa, then said, "Can anyone try this out?" She said, "Sure, just go to the starting point over there." She pointed down to a square painted on the ground with a large X in the middle. He jumped down and got prepared for the signal. He charged up one for all to 60%, then heard go. Izuku leapt from the ground, leaving cracks in it as he bounced from target to target, finishing the course in 7 seconds. Everyone in the audience couldn't believe the speed of the green-haired boy. Except for Bakugo, who walked off angry about being beaten again. When Izuku was done, he jumped back up to the balcony and asked, "How was that?" Melissa just stared intently at his arms before saying, "Hey Deku, do you mind coming with me? I have something I would like to show you in my lab." He said sure, then followed her as they walked away from the crowd. End of chapter 9.